All right, welcome to the second installment of the kind of little EO and Hard Times webinar that we've been doing during the COVID crisis, talking with different company leaders kind of about their experiences as employee-owned companies in past challenging moments, and kind of also the applicability to the challenges of the current economic crisis. So today, talking with Cindy Turcot, and the format will be we'll sort of have a she and I will have a conversation for the first half of the hour, and then I'll add all the folks who are sort of in the attendee slots to the conversation if they have questions or want to share things that are going on at their companies. So Cindy, maybe first you want to just talk a little about your role at Gardeners and kind of the background of the company before we get into the details.
Yeah. So for those of you who've not met me, I'm Cindy Turcot. I am the president at Gardener Supply, although I have been at Gardener Supply since we started in 1983. So I've done a lot of jobs from data entry all the way from being CFO, COO, and now president. So I've done lots of different jobs at Gardener Supply. And I've seen us through many different iterations of recessions and hard times and good times. So Gardener Supply, for those of you who don't know, we are the largest part of our business is our website and catalog. And we are about 70% of our business or 65% of our business coming through that way. And then we have our 4 retail stores, the 2 in Vermont, Burlington and Williston. And then we have one in Lebanon, New Hampshire, and one that we just purchased in January in Hadley, Massachusetts. We have about 260 year-round employees. And right now we are in the process and have added between 60 and 100 seasonal employees. So that just gives you a little bit about the landscape of us. We are 100% ESOP owned. We started our ESOP in 1987. We bought small pieces as we could afford to. And in 2009, we went to 100% ESOP owned. So that's a big little summary on us. Oh, I'll say one other thing. I'm sorry. In Vermont, in addition to our retail stores, we have our Intervale location, which is where our administrative offices are, our contact center, and one of our retail stores. We also have a distribution center, 130,000 square feet in Milton, and then we have our manufacturing facility up in Georgia, Vermont.
Great. So do you want to just kind of talk about, in terms of kind of recessions or sort of like downtimes for the company? You've had an employee ownership structure in place, at least to sort of some extent, since very close to the beginning of the company. So it's a pretty deep part of the culture. But do you want to talk a little bit about sort of what are some of the kind of key points in the company's history that have been challenging, and sort of how your responses and your employee ownership have intersected?
Yeah. We are actually, we'll talk about this a little bit later because gardening is actually booming right now. So we are in what for most people would call their holiday season, but this is our peak season right now. And gardening this year has been exploding. I don't know if you've read about it, but people are really interested in food security. So we are seeing unprecedented growth, and both our curbside retail is down, but it's still busy, and but our website has exploded. So we are actually very busy right now. So it's a very different kind of time, but we've certainly had our times where we've been in recessions too. And I think some of the conversation we can have today is about how we use employee ownership both in good times and in bad. And when I was actually talking with Matt about it, they aren't that much different actually in how we want to be good employee owners and use our employee ownership as a real benefit. In the past, when we've had recessions and we've had slow times and slower growth, we've really taken those opportunities to involve employees in those discussions. What do we do to adjust to being down? There are times where we've had to make staff reductions, but that's really a last resort for us. We are really trying to always figure out how we can lower our costs, how can we increase our sales, and involve employees in some of those ideas and thoughts. And so it's really coming up with what are the unique ways of asking and getting feedback from employees to really help with those issues and decisions that you have. whether it's departmental efficiencies, whether it's, one that we did a long time ago, it's always been one of my favorites, and I haven't done it in a while, was we were in a particularly hard time, and we actually at one of our staff meetings had people guess what our top 25 costs were, because that's really the top 25 was actually over 90% of all of our costs were in those top 25 categories. So when people were talking about, well, we should stop having bottled water, and I'm not talking individual bottles, but those bubblers, that we should stop having those. And really the reality was it was a very low level cost for us. But really when you think about things like postage, and for us at the time, because we had catalogs, and you think about your payroll costs and your fringe benefits and your rent and all the other things, there's the top 25 are really what we wanted people to focus their time on. So it's really thinking about what are the kinds of things that you can educate people about, so they can really think about what might we do that could affect one of those top 25 expenses. We got some amazing ideas from people when we did that. And I think people were also, I actually had them guess what the top 25 were, so that it was an involving exercise in trying to get people to think about that. I don't know if you want me to go into some of the ideas that are happening now for us on the other side, Matt, or do you have some more specific questions?
Yeah. Before we get into the kind of current situation and how you all are responding, I think one thing that's always an elephant in the room for employee-owned companies is the question of getting to the point where you have to say go through a layoff or something like that, because the idea of like, okay, if you're an owner but you're also an employee, there's this kind of, that's one of those concepts that's kind of like sometimes challenging for people to wrap their heads around.
Yeah.
So have you kind of like had experiences with that, and sort of, and how has that played out in the culture when you've sort of faced those hard decisions?
Yeah, yeah. Whenever you have to do a layoff, it's really one of the most horrible times for us is to ever have to do a layoff of our employee owners, and uh, and so usually for us it means we've taken every other step that we can. We're trying to look at every avenue that we can improve our profitability or our sales, so therefore our profitability, and really trying to engage, like I said, people in those kind of conversations. The reality is when you have to do something like that, it's horrible for the people that are laid off, and it's horrible for the people that are still there when they've lost close um, coworkers, and you've had to make a really hard decision. And I think um, it's as important as making sure you're taking care of the people as best you can that are gone. It's also a real important time to be communicating with your staff, immediately getting people together. What's happened? Why did it happen? Why did we choose what we chose? And because a lot of people are like, well, how could you have possibly done that? And the reality is, we are also looking out for all the shareholders that are in the ESOP. We have to look at share price, and when you have a share price that's gone down, it doesn't always go up. So for some people, in ESOPs, they're always looking at sort of meteor meteor what's the word um,
Meteoric.
meteoric, thank you, growth. And but in the reality for us, we've gone up over time, but we've had downward times too, so that we are always looking at that. Our staff is sort of used to that up and down. For some people, they're not ready for that. They've only prepared for growth, and isn't this great? And then the time that they have a drop in share price, that it's really, really difficult for their employees. And but we do
What
have to remember that we
on
are
that front,
there
what
for
have you
share price.
found? What have you found as the sort of the most useful frames for having those conversations about a down share price with folks?
Yeah. For us, it's keeping, we have monthly staff meetings, so we're always talking about our financials. Plus, we have an ESOP report we put out once a month that shows the numbers. It shows the sales and the profitability, so that people know where we are every single month. So we're keeping everybody up to speed, just as we all are getting the information. We're also educating on what it's looking like going out further. Is it, are we looking like we'll be up or down? What are the changes that we're making? What ideas do people have for changes? We've got an ESOP committee that's communicating out, and also sort of the heartbeat of where we are. The key, really big key that sometimes people do, and that's when we talk about our current environment, is sometimes when you're either too busy or you're too scared to actually communicate, that you're not being, you're not saying anything, and then that puts people into a spin, because people then are super nervous about what's going on. So for us, it's about having regular email communication, face to face through staff meetings, video meetings, whatever you need to do to make sure you're communicating directly with the employees so that they know that you're either having troubles or you're in the opposite, which is you're showing this growth that you need help with.
And so, I think especially for employee-owned companies, what we were talking about before, layoffs are oftentimes, that last resort. You have these owners and this kind of community of work and skilled people who are really sort of valuable to get, together, and oftentimes have been invested in quite a bit. So are there other strategies or approaches that Gardeners has used to sort of be creative in how to sort of use people as alternatives to layoffs in times, and shifting people into different roles or other things like that, that can kind of more preserve the human capital in the
Yeah,
downtime, so you're more ready for when things turn around.
yeah, absolutely. We are, for us, it's about how do you move people around when if you have certain growth in certain areas, can we move people into other locations to help? For example, with our website, this past year, we were increasing our number of products that we were putting on our website. And so we moved somebody from the contact center over into the web. It's how do we keep using the people that are within our staff, Amazon growth in the marketplace there. We moved resources into those areas. Whenever we had people that left, we stopped filling those positions. So we were really trying to do it through natural, that's the natural growth, or natural, when people leave, turnover,
Hmm.
and always trying to look at what are the skill sets people have that maybe can help in another location, especially if we've had somebody leave and there's a hole there, but we don't want to fill it with a new person. We want to fill it with someone else. So it's always thinking about constantly when you're in a soft time of what are all of your resources to do that. We've even, put it out there and said, people, can you tell us what some of your skill sets are so that we know what they are, so that, because you don't always know. Someone that works in the call center, we have remarkable people that work in our call center or in our distribution center that have pasts that we have no idea might be helpful when it comes to the needs that we have maybe in a different department in marketing or merchandising, and can help. So it's really always knowing how people can help. And then there's the other is what else could we be doing right now if we want to just live through a time period where we are going to pay more. What are the kind of projects that we can put people on to do instead of what they're doing right now that might be advantageous, whether it's cleaning, whatever it might be, a project that you in particular wanted to get done and you haven't gotten to, and can we resource, whether it's retail acquisitions for us right now. And we had some of our contact center people doing research in different areas of the country to say, what are the top garden centers in these areas that we might be interested in, those kind of things, and making contact with. And because that's one of our strategies now, is to buy more retail stores. So we use 2 or 3 of our contact center people to help us when they had some extra time. It's those kinds of things that you're always having to think about.
Great. So now shifting gears from those past experiences to kind of what's going on right now. Do you want to give us the kind of quick overview of the sort of how the COVID crisis has impacted gardeners, and what you're kind of finding in terms of the strategies you're using to adapt to the challenges that are coming up?
Yeah, it's a little easier to speak to those because they're a little bit more current than some of the others. So I can be super specific on those. We are with the gardening market being so strong right now, and actually Amazon completely went out of the market of advertising in that space, which put us as one of the top people that are, when you're looking on Google or in your looking for raised beds or whatever, we're going to come up much more prominently, where Amazon would have been one of your first that you would have seen instead. So we're seeing extraordinary growth right now, growth that we have never seen in people being in the gardening marketplace, and people really wanting, like I said, to have food security right now. I think people are super nervous about what's going on, and people are home. And so people, you're probably all like this yourselves, which you've probably already been out in your yard, you're already raking, you're already ordering your mulch. And that's what's happening around the country. People are home and they are looking towards whether it's with baking for King Arthur Flour, another of our ESOP companies that's doing well, or us. So us, we're sort of dealing with the opposite, which is how do we have an environment where we are still at work. We actually, our Intervale location, we've got everybody that we could. We moved remotely. We have always talked about having a contact center and where some people could work remotely, and that we would have more of a hiring pool if we could, let's say, have more people from the Northeast Kingdom, but not have to come into the building. And we've always had reasons for not doing that. Well, when this came in, and we really wanted to get people off-site, we moved our entire contact center off-site within a week. Within 4 or 5 days, we had everybody off-site, and sending them with their computers and sending them home and getting them set up so that they could tie into our systems at work. It did mean that we had to have all our calls be on voicemail, and we're all stripping voicemails to answer those calls right now. And in another few days, we actually of all the headsets we need to be able to move live again. But we've been 2 to 3 weeks where we're answering it voicemail. So it means, what are all the ideas you have to say, we need to get people offsite? What are we going to do? And getting everybody. So it was working with the contact center, especially the supervisors, managers. How do we make it, instead of no, we can't, which is what's always happened around this topic, instead, how can we, and how quickly can we do it? So to move that many people offsite, because in a contact center, you don't have the social distancing. You're all kind of right next to each other. And as you're going into busy season, we really needed to get them separated. So we have now almost all of them. We now have new people coming in, so they're able to social distance in our space. But that's an example of getting where you have to move super quickly. And on the other hand, we're now with the volumes of orders we're getting in right now, we need to hire people, and our training team is off-site now. And so the question was, how do we train people that are coming now into our facility, because we're not ready to have them be remote yet, but yet your trainers aren't on site. And so, at first it was like, well, we can't bring anybody in. And I'm like, well, we have to bring people in, or we're going to be out 4 weeks in answering customers' questions. And so that team, basically, I said, we have to bring in people. You've got to figure it out. And by that following Monday morning, I met with them on a Friday. They had a training program, and how can we train people? And we may only be able to train in this way, but they can help us in this way. And this is how they can voice transcribe first and then start to answer emails before they even have to learn our more complicated computer system. And they came up with a whole system. And that was not leadership doing that. That was the training team saying, we have to move from no to yes. And so I think we have to rely on our employees who are in the seats to figure out how they're going to make these things work. As a leader, I'll add one piece, and I'll let you jump in again. I think it's also our jobs now. So we've got all these people that are working remotely, but the reality is our distribution center is still open. It's considered an essential service. Everybody wants people to be ordering on the web as opposed to going into retail stores, but we have to get the product out the door. So our distribution center and our retail stores are curbside. So the governor's order came out on a Sunday night. When we had our retail stores open, by Monday morning, we had to be curbside. So again, everybody's moving to imagine taking a retail store and now you're having to pick from a retail store in an environment that was not set up in that way. Again, it took every employee owner to figure that out. And so to think that the managers know all the answers, they don't live and breathe it as much as getting all the people that are working on the floor to figure out how they can do it and do it quickly, because they had no choice. I'm just going to add one more thing. Well, do you want me to talk about, I was just going to talk a little bit about how we're communicating to our staff. Are you okay with me keep going on that?
Yeah. Maybe I had one sort of question about that, because I think this is something that is maybe even a tension that's emerged in a lot of workplaces, is that that there's some positions, some types of roles where folks are expected to work from home, and there's other types of roles where folks do have to come in, and in some ways that's kind of like an even more intense version of the sort of like white collar blue collar split that happens in many companies in terms of culture and what's expected of people. So Has that conversation kind of been playing out within the company? You know, how is that? How are you navigating that from kind of a cultural
Yeah,
expectations
exactly.
perspective?
It's a super big issue because the people that are on site, it is really stressful, especially when we had our retail stores open to the public and the public not necessarily following social protocols. And so it was very stressful for the on-site people. You know, remote's just different. Remote has social isolation, and you are not seeing people and you're not getting out. And so there's totally different issues for the remote workers. So you have your remote and then you have your on-site. And for us, it's not necessarily blue collar or white collar, and we have, but it is differences in positions. And the reality is that we're allowed to be open. We should be open. We're in peak season. We need to be getting those gardening products, and the customers are buying at a rate which is showing the importance it is to them to be able to grow and have food security. So one conversation with our staff is, why are we open? And having that conversation and how important it is, not only to our own business, but more importantly, that the customers really need us to be there. And so the key for the on-site people is that we're creating a super safe environment, that we're wearing gloves, we're wearing masks, that we're having social distancing, we're building plywood on our pack stations, because they used to be back to back and you'd be facing each other, and now there's a plywood piece so that you're not breathing on each other. And you know, how do you, and that came from somebody on the floor that said, hey, what about if we do this? Then we could have the packing stations be closer together, because we didn't have enough packing stations even fulfill the orders that were coming in. So how do we come up with ideas? And that came right off of the floor. Somebody came up with it, and the next day we were building those plywoods, so that now it is 6 feet to go around each other to get there. So it's, how do you engage people's minds to say, what are we doing? How do we do this? And then I'm going to just talk a little bit about leadership. We have 6 key managers. All of us are located at a different facility. If our staff is needing to be on site, we're going to be there with them. A lot of people are working remotely, but our top key leaders are representing different locations. So our CEO is down at our Lebanon location. I was for 2 weeks at our Williston location. I quarantined for 2 weeks, and now I'm in our distribution center. So we're keeping all the same people working in each location, so we have no cross-contamination of facilities. But again, how do you think about those things and making sure you don't have IT, HR, everybody working only in certain facilities, so that if we have an incident in one place, that we don't have any crossing of happening. The next level I want to talk about is communicating. We can have face-to-face staff meetings. What started to happen is we were so busy that we stopped communicating. I was communicating through email, but within the facilities, we were having a stopping of communication, which caused chaos and gossip about, not bad gossip, but I mean, talking about things that we just needed to clarify and needed to be heard from everyone. So
Speculating when you don't have a
speculating
firm sense of
and
what's
concern for what we're doing, and what's the mask protocol, what's the glove protocol, and people aren't following the rules, and how do we get all that straightened out. And so we got back to our communications. We're now back to staff meetings, but we let it drop. I mean, we were all in chaos about what was happening. We all were in this world of getting people remote and getting back to, you have to communicate. So we are back to staff meetings. We again are doing multiple ones because of social distancing in our conference room, but we're doing it multiple times. And this past week, we just had virtual staff meetings for all our remote workers. And so I encourage each of you to think about how you do that. We ended up doing them for the non-contact center people, and then our contact center people we did separately because they had some more details we needed to talk about. But what I did, one example I did is I asked everybody to send pictures of their remote workspace. And out of the probably 75 people that were online, at least 25 sent pictures with little captions. So at the end of the staff meeting, we showed all the pictures of all their coworkers and their pets and their workspace and how they transform their kitchen. And because you imagine, people have roommates, they have kids, they've got pets, they've got all these things they're dealing with remotely. And so it was super fun to show it, and people really appreciated seeing what their coworkers were doing. And also for those remote, they need to see us. They need to hear voices. They're working on emails all day and seeing nobody. They need to see us. They need to hear from us. I just monologued for a while. So Matt, back to you.
No, that was very helpful. So I feel like this is probably a good time for us to kind of stop the recording portion, and then and then just kind of like let the folks who are in the attendee room sort of into the call to share a little bit about what's going on with them and to sort of ask questions or reflect on what you've said. So I will stop the recording portion now.